All stand.
Father, just coming back to your second statement, which you should still have in front of you, if you could turn to paragraph 10 of that statement. Do you have that?
Yes.
And you say there that it was 1993 when Ridsdale approached you and said he had to go to court for what was a small matter. And then in paragraph 19, you say you travelled to Melbourne to go to the court.
Sorry, I must have a different copy.
It's your second statement. Perhaps we can help you.
No, this is my second statement.
Paragraph 10. And perhaps we can help you.
No, this is my second statement.
Paragraph 10.
Sorry, I'll take it from here. I've been really looking.
Yes, certainly.
Yeah.
Do you see paragraph 10 there?
Yes, I do now, thank you.
So it's in 1993.
Yes.
And then if you go to paragraph 12, you say that you went to Melbourne to go to the court.
Yes.
Now, did he approach you in Ballarat?
Yes.
So he approached you in advance of going to court?
Yes.
Do you remember now how far in advance?
Not how far in advance, I remember where.
Was Mr. Ridsdale represented at that hearing? Did he have a lawyer with him?
I can't remember. I had to go and see, would it be a barrister before the hearing?
You had to go and see someone before
Yes.
the hearing?
Yes.
And how far before the hearing did you see them?
Oh, that was that morning.
Before what we now understand to be a sentencing hearing?
Yes.
So you saw him the morning of being in court?
Yes.
And what did he say to you?
Ridsdale or the
barrister?
He just asked me what it was that I was going to say. What I came down to say. So I told him, he said, it's okay, you can go.
Did he tell you what the charges were?
Not that I recall.
So he asked you what you were going to say without there being a discussion of the charges?
Yeah, that's as I recall it.
You didn't take the opportunity to say to him, what's he charged with?
No.
Did you understand he was pleading guilty?
I don't recall that.
You don't recall one way or the other whether he was pleading guilty?
No, I don't recall one way or the other.
What did you think you were being asked to do?
Simply to give a reference as to what sort of person I thought he was.
But in the course of a trial, in the course of a sentencing hearing, what did you understand was to be your part in this proceeding?
Simply that, when asked to sort of say, what do you say about this man?
And it didn't occur to you to ask the barrister, what's he been charged with?
No.
And the barrister, you say, never told you?
Not that I recall.
When you say not that you recall, if you were told that he'd been charged with sexually assaulting a child, that would stand out.
I think I would remember that.
I think you might too.
Yes.
But you say that neither Ridsdale nor the barrister ever told you what he'd been charged with.
Yes.
And you further say that Ridsdale never told you that he did it.
No.
So you were being asked to go to court to say that Ridsdale was a good man.
Yes.
Without any knowledge of why he was there,
yes,
what his attitude to being there was,
yes,
and not the slightest idea what the outcome of the proceeding might be.
No.
Some might think that's naive.
It was naive. I concur with that.
Well, some might think it's more than naive. It was reckless in the information you were giving to the court without the knowledge that you've said you had.
Well, I'll accept that judgment.
You understood, didn't you, when the charges were being read out, that Ridsdale was pleading guilty?
I can't remember that, whether I knew that he was pleading guilty or not.
Well, you were there after the charges were read out.
Yes.
You were there when he or his barrister on his behalf entered the plea of guilty?
I was there for the whole thing, so I presume I was.
Well,
but I can't remember the details, I'm sorry.
Can I suggest to you that you must have known he was pleading guilty before you said what you had to say on his behalf?
I really cannot remember any sequence.
If that's the case, then not only did you know the charges, but you knew that Ridsdale was saying to the court he had done what he was charged with, and even with that knowledge, you still spoke on his behalf.
That's the sequence, yes.
Why?
Now I don't know why, but then at that stage it was just what I was asked to do by the court.
Well, you weren't asked by the court, you were asked by Ridsdale.
No, in the procedure, I was asked, or the different witnesses asked to get up and sort of say what they had to say.
Well, you could have got up and said, look, I didn't know until now what he was charged with. I didn't know that he was pleading guilty to it. In all of those circumstances, there's nothing I have to say.
I could have done that, but I didn't think of it.
Was it the case, looking back now, that you were more concerned about Ridsdale and what might happen to him rather than...
No.
Well, how can you say that given your recollection is so poor as to matters that happened, that didn't happen?
Because all I can remember is my reaction as I heard the charges being read and what they meant and what they signified. That's what I remember.
But you didn't respond to that reaction by saying, I'll have nothing to do.
My reaction as I heard the charges being read and what they meant and what they signified. That's what I remember.
But you didn't respond to that reaction by saying, I'll have nothing to do with
No.
this. Now, you've been the parish priest since 2001?
2001, a parish priest of East Ballarat,
Yes. And prior to you taking up that position, you were aware of complaints against at least Monsignor Day in the 70s?
Yes, I was aware of that. Yes.
You were aware of convictions against Ridsdale, Best and Dowland during the 90s?
When I took up the position?
Well, yes.
Yes, certainly of Ridsdale and of Dowland, I think, but I'm not sure about Best.
There were further convictions in the first decade of this century, weren't there? Upon how it was that this group of men who at various stages were working and living in the same area all came to abuse children, among others, who are within your parish.
Yes, it does puzzle me.
Well, did you reflect upon it? You said
Yes.
The result of that reflection was that it puzzled you?
Yeah, I can't come to any conclusions as to how they came to be there at the same time.
Well, leaving aside that they were there at the same time, what have you reflected on why each of them individually did what they did and got away with it for as long as they did?
Don't know the answer to that.
Well, have you reflected on it?
I've tried to.
You haven't been successful?
No.
Well, it must be the case, to be the parish priest of Ballarat East, that much of this criminal conduct took place in the area that you're now responsible for.
Yes.
In order for you to do what you can to ensure that nothing happens again like this, don't you need to have reflected upon and come to some view as to why it happened here?
No, I can't answer that.
Well, have you thought about it?
Yes.
Have you come to the view that what is in place now in your parish will mean it won't happen again?
Yes, it's because it's a totally different scene for starters. You know, there are no appointments of Christian brothers to the school. There's no other priest in the parish but me.
So do you think by removing the Christian brothers and any other priest but you, that's what makes it safe that it won't happen again?
No, I'm saying that those people are no longer present. I mean, priests and brothers are not the only people who are pedophiles. I realise that. So, but the situation in which you had a group of brothers at the school and a priest in the presbytery, that no longer exists. And so therefore, I say the situation is different.
Do you think that the culture of the church at the time and the structure of the church at the time contributed in any way to the offending taking place and it not being discovered for some time?
I have to reflect that the culture probably did contribute to that.
How?
Priests and brothers were sort of put in positions of not honour, but
Put in positions
like, I was going to say not honour, I'm just searching for the word, that they were privilege, I guess.
Power?
Power, yes, yeah.
Well, aren't the priests today in a similar position of privilege and power, particularly over children in their parish?
I think there are a whole lot of protocols that are around to protect the children. And the power, I think the power of the priest has shifted, has changed, and the attitude of the people towards the priest has changed over the period of time.
What else was it about the cultural structure of the church when the offences were committed that you think, if not facilitated them, made the circumstances where they weren't detected or action taken?
No, I don't know.
You'd need to be satisfied, wouldn't you, that whatever part of the cultural structure contributed to those events, those parts were not present today.
Yes.
And you say that these men are no longer there.
Yes.
And indeed no Christian brothers are here. And you are the only priest in the parish. Does that mean that you believe responsibility for the actions lies only with those who committed them?
No, not totally.
Where is the church responsible?
Well, perhaps it wasn't sufficiently vigilant and prepared to listen.
Who wasn't sufficiently vigilant and who wasn't prepared to listen?
Bishops, other priests, people to whom people had gone for advice or help or to make a complaint.
So those who you think lacked vigilance were those who received complaints against any of these men at or about the time of the abuse?
Yes, that would be right.
Do you add yourself in among those men?
No, I don't.
You must have in mind some particular members of the church. Who do you have in mind when you make those statements?
Basically bishops.
Bishops.
Yeah.
When you say Ballarat bishops, you're talking about bishops of Ballarat May.
Well, that's the one I know. But, I mean, if we're talking about institutional sexual violence, it could be elsewhere as well.
You mentioned to Mr. Ness that the attitude towards priests has changed. In what way has it changed?
I don't think they're set aside quite as much as they might have been before. And I don't think we seek to be set aside as we may have done before.
What do you mean by set aside?
Oh, given positions of privilege.
Such as?
Oh, people, even as simple as people standing at the end of the room and often treated, if they go visiting to a house or something like that, everything sort of stopped because the priest was here and those sorts of things.
We hear in private sessions, and you know the commissioners...
I'm sorry, in which sessions?
private sessions. You know about private sessions, which the commissioners hold, where survivors come and tell us of their experience.
Yes.
And commissioners collectively have now spoken to thousands of people.
Yes.
We hear commonly of a priest who becomes, collectively have now spoken to thousands of people.
Yes.
We hear commonly of a...
I am, yes.
And by that means the priest gains access to the family and the children and the household.
Yes.
You're familiar with that?
Yes, I am.
And very often we are told that the parents, particularly the mother, is very supportive of the priest spending time with the children.
Heard of that, yes.
Yeah. And that provides the opportunity for abuse. Now, does the culture in the Catholic Church facilitate that mechanism as a means by which abuse can take place today?
Today, I believe it would be less likely to be so.
Why would that be?
Because I think that people's appreciation of the position of priest and priesthood has changed, and I think amongst a lot of priests, their image and model of priesthood has changed as well.
We learn that having become close to the family, it's not uncommon that abusive priests would take boys in particular away for weekends or for bushwalks or bike rides and so on. Does that sort of thing still happen in the same way in the church?
Not at all.
Not at all?
No, and well, not at all in the same way. Whether it ever happens, I can't answer for that, but I don't know of any occasion when it does, or any priest who's doing that at present.
Have you received from your superiors any instruction? Has there been discussions at a senior level about the way priests should relate to families and children in families?
Well, through Integrity in Ministry, the document there and the dissemination of that, talking about the what's appropriate and not appropriate in ministry and in dealing with people.
What about at your priests' conferences? Are these matters formally discussed? Are they on the agenda for discussion at these conferences?
No.
Do you think they should be?
Yes, either of those conferences or, and I might be getting confused here or we're cross purposes a little bit. If we're talking about an in-service, I remember in-service about sort of trying to teach us about what goes into the makeup of the pedophile and therefore what to look out for, what signs to look out for. Remember that sort of thing being discussed a number of years ago. But just in terms of abnormal conferences now, no, it wouldn't feature.
Well, have you talked about how the culture that existed, you say in the past, facilitated the priest who wished to becoming an abuser? Have you talked about that amongst yourselves at your conferences?
Specifically, no, not as a topic, but in normal conversation or general conversation, I'd say yes.
And if you talked about whether there should be different practices adopted by priests in terms of their contact one-on-one with children?
Yes, just not to engage in those sorts of contacts.
Has that been a matter of discussion at your conferences?
Not in a formal sense, but amongst priests themselves, yes.
Or do you think it should be discussed in a formal sense, that the bishop should take the responsibility to ensure that these matters are discussed?
Well, the bishop has taken the responsibility in trying to disseminate the ideas of integrity in ministry, which deals with these matters throughout the diocese, not just among the priests, but amongst all people in the parishes. Well,
that's the next step, of course, because the same position applies to those who are members of religious orders, doesn't it?
Yes.
And I assume it would have been a familiar pattern again for those religious orders to become close to families.
I would assume so.
With the same possible terrible consequences. is it right to think that what we are learning in private sessions, that the exalted position of the priest and his access to households is a significant issue that the church needs to address?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you believe the church has addressed it adequately so far?
I believe it is addressing it.
Have we got far enough yet?
I don't think we've ever gone far enough.
You said earlier that the bishops should take responsibility, and then you referred to a bishop singularly. Who were you referring to?
I was unaware that I'd made that change.
We can go back to the transcript,
Yeah.
but you were talking about your diocese
Yes.
at the time, and you referred to a bishop. Were you speaking of Bishop Mulcairns?
He was the bishop at that time, yes.
Well, leaving aside at that time, is it your view that Bishop Mulcairns should take some responsibility for the offending that occurred under his watch?
Some responsibility, yes.
What are the limits of that responsibility?
I can't answer that.
What are the limits of that responsibility?
I can't answer that.
When did you first form the view that Bishop Mulcairns should take some responsibility for the offending which occurred under his watch?
Sometime after a number of these issues had arisen.
So in the
I mean, it wasn't the immediate thing to sort of say the bishop needs to take responsibility. We all need to take responsibility.
the bishop more than most?
He's possibly the pivotal person, yeah.
And what did he do that he either shouldn't have done, or what should he have done that he didn't do? The minutes that you took at the consultors' meetings and the evidence you've given about the practice of reasons being given that Bishop Mulcairns knew about complaints about Ridsdale and still moved him from parish to parish.
Yes.
When did you become aware of that?
I can't answer that as to when.
During the time you were his secretary?
No, I don't think I was then. I would guess it being later.
Before you became parish priest, the position you hold now?
At Ballarat East.
Yes.
Certainly before that, yes.
When Ridsdale was first before the courts in 1993?
Are you asking should he have been removed?
Well, when he was before the courts in 1993, was that the time that you became aware of what Mulcairns has done in accordance with your previous answer?
Don't believe I had thought it through to that extent.
Had you thought it through after you were aware, through your being in court on that day, of what Ridsdale was charged with and the fact that he pleaded guilty to it?
Sorry?
You said that you don't believe you'd thought it through at
Yes.
the time when you went to court. Was it the case that you thought it through after that occasion?
After that occasion, yes.
When?
I don't know how long after that occasion, but in the process of time, you begin to form opinions and come to conclusions. So it's not something that happens immediately, it's something that happened over a period of time.
So the next time that Ridsdale was before the courts and pleaded guilty was 1994. You aware of that?
I'm not aware of that sequence.
And then the next time he was before the courts was 2006.
Okay.
Are you able to, with that piece of information, help us with when it was that you took the view you've told us you had about Bishop Mulcairns and his responsibility?
As I said at the outset, I can't remember when that was.
Did you share that view with anyone in the church?
I can't remember specifically, no.
Quite a
More than likely in conversations with other priests.
It's a significant view to have, isn't it, of a bishop, that they have some responsibility for the offending that took place on their watch?
Well, it is significant. Yeah.
And more likely you had discussions with in conversations with other priests about it?
More than likely.
Did you speak to the successor bishop about it?
No, not that I recall.
Current bishop?
No.
Thank you. I'm not further.
Tell me this, apart from the problems that have emerged with families and priests, we hear from many people who've been abused as altar boys.
Yes.
Now, is it still the practice to have altar boys in the parishes?
Altar boys and altar girls.
It still is.
And not every parish has them. They are at St. Lepius.
Well, has there been discussions in the church about what the rules of practice should be about the interchange between priests and altar boys?
They'd be the same as the interchange between a priest and any child.
Which is what?
All those precautions about not touching, not being, my apologies, not being isolated with them, respecting them.
We hear commonly of abuse occurring when the child, altar boy particularly, is alone with the priest in the sacristy or some...
Yes.
Now, can that happen today?
I imagine it could happen. It's advised not to happen.
Advised where?
Well, just in the protocols of not being alone with children and in isolated rooms and so forth with children.
Do you think that injunction is obeyed?
It is.
Now, Ms. Vanessa asked you about when you first came to think that the bishop may have failed by moving Ridsdale around.
Yes.
You must have been suspicious in your early days as the secretary, weren't you?
Of why he was being moved?
Yes.
No, it wasn't. The sexual abuse of children was not in the same level of consciousness in people as it is now.
Well, we've taken you through the minutes, but
yes,
you say it just wasn't occurring to you that what was really happening.
No, obviously not.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions?
It's just one question, if I may, is Father McInerney, in answer to questions put by Councillor System, in terms of those persons who were not as vigilant as they ought to have been, I believe your response may have been a reference to bishops, plural. In addition to Bishop Mulcairns, who was it that you thought, in their position as bishop, that was not as vigilant as they ought to have been?
I used the word bishops. It would have been just general, no other specific people.
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
If you want to, please. Father McInerney, you've told the Commission today that it was when you heard the charges against Gerald Ridsdale read out in court that is in 1993, that you first learned that he had behaved in these ways against children by sexually abusing them.
Yes.
And you've spoken of how appalled and dismayed you were at that point in the court that day. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And how shocked and aghast you were, I
yes.
think. Now, does it follow that at no previous time, either in any meeting or otherwise, did anyone ever tell you or suggest to you that Ridsdale was abusing children or suspected of abusing children?
I think what follows is that I have absolutely no recollection of any such conversation.
And if such
Well, just a minute. You say you have no recollection.
Yes.
You were taken, of course, to the minute that's behind tab 11 this morning. We might go there again. Remember the one that talks about confidentiality?
Yes.
And talking about over the page, Ridsdale and temporary appointment?
Yes, I remember that.
We reached the conclusion that the only thing that could have been talked about in that context was the sexual transgression, didn't we?
We did this morning, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was your evidence.
Yeah, it doesn't register with me. I mean, this recollection of this meeting does not register with me. But reading those minutes, that's the conclusion to which I would come.
That must be right. So, apart from Mr. Gray's question, when I talked to you before about when you first maybe appreciated that the bishop wasn't doing the right thing, it goes right back to this time, doesn't it?
In my consciousness, I don't remember these particular meetings.
No, but we've got the minutes, and we've agreed together what the minutes tell us, haven't we?
We have agreed to that, yes.
And does it not follow that whether you had it front of mind or not, it goes back to that time that this failure starts to occur? Starts to occur. We've been over that. Yeah. We've discussed the possibilities having regard to the way these minutes are carefully crafted. And we've reached the conclusion this must have been a discussion about sexual transgression, haven't we?
Yes, okay.
And if that's the case, then what we have is the bishop and others who have knowledge and do nothing about it, don't we?
That would appear to be the conclusion, yes.
And furthermore, thereafter, for some time, facilitate the continual movement, don't we?
That would appear to be the conclusion, yes.
And furthermore, thereafter, yes, Mr. Gray.
Do you have any recollection of Bishop Mulkern's ever saying anything to the effect that Ridsdale had some issue with respect to sexual behaviour or sexual abuse?
I don't recall him saying that.
You recall him saying that at any time, that is to say, either in a consultants committee meeting or outside a consultants committee meeting?
I'm sure he would have, but I don't recall specific instances.
If you had heard someone say to you that Ridsdale had committed sexual abuse or was suspected of having done so, would it have been prior to 1993, would it have been such a shock to you when the charges were read out on that day in court?
I'm sorry, would you...
If prior to the day in court in 1993, yes, you had somehow come to hear,
yes,
either from something said in a consultants meeting or otherwise, that Ridsdale had abused children or might have abused children, you would hardly have been shocked or appalled when you heard the charges read out, would you?
I wouldn't think so.
Does that indicate to you that prior to 1993, and I will come back to the minutes, you had not in fact heard anyone say anything to that effect?
I think what it says is that nothing had registered with me.
Father, it might be that what you are now telling us about your lack of knowledge may not be correct. And also about your shock at hearing the charges read may not be correct.
I'm sorry, that's absolutely correct, the shock.
Well, you understand that that's a possibility, don't you?
That's the way you're reading it. Yeah, I understand that, but I reaffirm that I was shocked when I heard that, and that was big period of change within me.
At any meeting while you were the Bishop's Secretary, that is between about 1973 and 1978, do you have any recollection of anyone, whether Bishop Mulcairns or anyone else, saying such a thing, i.e. something to the effect that Ridsdale had abused children or might have done so?
In those meetings? No.
Yes. Now, at the beginning of the questioning this morning, there was a question to you along these lines that when you were the Secretary in the 1970s, the purpose of the Consultants Committee was primarily to appoint people to positions and to deal with property matters and the like. Remember, you agreed with that?
Yes.
Now, was it the Consultants Committee that actually did the appointing of people, or did the Bishop do so?
Officially, the Bishop did it.
And is the Consultants Committee a committee which the Bishop can consult to the extent that he chooses to do so?
Yes, I believe that's true.
And then the Bishop, having consulted with his consultants to the extent that he wants to,
yes,
it's the Bishop who makes the decision,
yes.
is that right?
Yes.
Was there ever an occasion, to your knowledge, when an appointment was made?
The decision,
Yes.
is that right?
Yes.
Was there ever an occasion, to your
I don't recollect one.
You say you don't recollect that ever happening?
No.
No.
Now, a question was put to you again this morning, which was put in the present tense, appreciating that you are a consultor at the moment. And the question was to this effect: it's routinely the case that the Bishop tells consultors, I'll start again. The question was, it's routinely the case that bishops, plural, tell consultors what they know about people under discussion for appointments, and you answered yes to that. Do you remember that
Yes,
this morning? Now, that's your experience now as a consultor to Bishop Bird here in Ballarat over the last couple of years, is
Yes.
that right? Now, what about in the 1970s when you were the Secretary of the Bishop, although not a consultor yourself? Was it then the case in the 1970s that Bishop Mulcairns told the consultors what he knew about people under discussion for appointments?
I would guess in some instances.
Some or...
Look, I presume he would, but I can't answer it definitively.
Well, when you say you can't answer definitively, you can answer from your own experience. And I had understood you this morning to actually answer the question generally, that was your...
That it was a normal practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
You mentioned at one stage, and I don't have this wording exactly, that at about that time Bishop Mulcairns had or developed the practice of, in effect, working out himself in advance of the meeting what he had in mind doing in terms of appointments, and presenting that as his intended decision to the consultants. Is that right?
Yes. Because,
yes. Sorry, go on.
Well, I think he took the opinion that sort of coming in cold, nobody much spoke and just sat there and nothing happened. So he'd bring in a suggested format and they could work from there.
And the format would be parish A,
yes,
priest X, parish B, priest Y, and so on.
Yes.
And there might on any given day be 3 or 4 of those, or 10 or 12, or however many it was. Now, typically in the 1970s, when he did that, was there any ever opposition to what he proposed?
Yes, there could have been, yeah.
often or not often?
No, not often.
Ever in your actual recollection?
I think so.
Do you have any memory of...
No, specifically, I just think that there may have been an occasion in which someone was suggested to a parish administrator, or the argument was, should he be administrator or should he be appointed parish priest?
Was it typical in the meeting that you attended as secretary in the 1970s, once the bishop had put forward his proposed moves, that there would be a lengthy discussion of any sort about any or all of them?
It could have been, yes.
Was it typical?
Typical?
Yes.
No.
Would that happen at every meeting about every proposed move?
No, no.
Would it happen at every meeting about one or two proposed moves, or only less often?
Less often, I'd say. Yeah.
So only at some meetings?
Yes.
Now, I just wanted to take you back to a couple of these minutes, although I hope briefly. Could we have exhibit 28-31, please, on the screen? This is the one you were shown reasonably early this morning. It's from December 1993. Do you see that?
It's 16th of December, yeah.
And so this is at the point when you were a consultor for a period of some years in the early 90s.
Yes.
And as was pointed out, or as you were taken this morning, at the bottom of the page, if we scroll down, there's an item, staffing, which starts off, Bishop Malkern's reported about someone. And then there's a paragraph beginning the meeting. Do you see that?
Yes.
If we just go a bit further.
Yes.
The meeting then addressed, etc. And it says, after due consideration and discussion, the following recommendations were put to the bishop by the consultors about New Year postings. And at the end of that, when we go right down to the halfway down the next page, the entry says moved, one person seconded, another person carried, and then Bishop Malkern's accepted the recommendations of the consultors and confirmed the above appointments. See all that? So that's how things were recorded in December 1993. Do you have a memory of that arrangement being followed? That is, here, apparently according to the minutes, it's the consultors making recommendations to the bishop rather than the other way around.
This is the proper order of things, and the consultants might make this recommendation. And the bishop either accepts or rejects their propositions.
I think, Father, that's what you told us this morning as to the process that was followed.
Pardon?
That's what you told us this morning, was the process that was followed.
Yes.
Yeah, back in the 70s, though, when you were secretary, some 20 years before that, you will have noticed, and I'll just show them to you again, that the minutes do not record matters happening in that way. Does that accord with your recollection?
It's pointing up the inaccuracy of my recording.
Well, if I could just start, I won't do them all, but if I could start with tab exhibit 28-32. This is from September 1973, so 20 years before the one we just looked at, and in your first year as Bishop Secretary. See that?
Yes.
Now, the first page you were taken to, and it includes, if we scroll down, an item correspondent which includes a letter from Father Ridsdale applying for Port Fairy. And then on the second page, but I'm looking at the exhibit, which is 2832, whereas what's on the screen is the redacted one. So if we could just have the exhibit 2832. When we scroll down to the second page, there's a heading Appointments. I don't know if you can read that.
Yes, I can, thank you.
And it simply says parish priests with a whole lot of parishes and names, administrators with parishes and names, and assistants with parishes and names. Do you see that?
Oh, no, it needs to scroll up a bit.
Oh, if it scrolls a bit further. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, was that an example of the method that you mentioned the bishop in those days using, namely coming to the meeting with his intended moves and them not being opposed?
Oh, I couldn't say in that particular meeting.
Was that the practice at that time, for the bishop to do that as you've described?
Not at this early stage, I wouldn't think.
What was the practice then at the early stage?
Where the parishes vacant would be declared, and the consultants would, the parishes vacant would be declared, the application for those parishes would be announced, and then the consultants would work with that as to which order appointments should be made.
Based on this proposed arrangement?
But it's usually based upon seniority.
But I'm referring to the system, if that's the word, that, and it's not your word, that you mentioned of the bishop bringing to the meeting his intended
No, I think
arrangements.
that was a later practice, later than this time.
But during your time as secretary?
Yes, I think so. No, I think more likely during my time as consultant in that second period.
So in the earlier period then, in the 70s, typically what happened at the meeting in terms of appointments?
As the vacant parishes were announced, the applications were put forward, they'll be ordered down in order of priority and seniority. The area of more discussion would become in areas of the assistant priest as to which parishes should receive an assistant priest or which assistant priest should be moved from one parish to another.
Did you say recommendations?
Yes.
Well, how did it go? A recommendation from the consultants or a recommendation from the bishop?
With the assistant priests?
Or the parish priests?
Either way.
Could be either?
Yes.
I see. All right. Just pardon me a second. So that's my question, John.
Can you just give us some picture of the consultative process? I take it you met in a room at the cathedral or somewhere?
A number of these were in the bishop's house, I noticed. I noticed a number of these were in the bishop's house.
The bishop's house?
Yes, separated from the cathedral.
Around a table, I assume?
Yes, around a table, around a lounge room.
And you all would have known each other pretty well?
Yes.
And there would have been no inhibition from anyone in talking and contributing to the discussion, I take it?
No, I'm sorry?
No inhibition? No one
inhibition? No, I wouldn't think so.
And I take it the bishop set out to facilitate discussion and views coming from everyone who he'd put onto his consultants committee.
And as a young man at the time, it used to astound me how little people wanted to have to say in that forum when they were chosen for that position. They didn't seem to want to say much, commit themselves.
What about as an old man?
talk too much now.
But your experience was that everyone had their say if they wanted to.
Yes, if they wanted to, it's completely open to that, yes.
I mean, no one dominated or...
No.
Yes. Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah.
The occasion on which you accompanied Ridsdale to court in 1993 was the first occasion that you had heard that Ridsdale had been charged with indecent assault?
That's my recollection, absolutely.
And it's the first time that you had heard that he was pleading guilty to those charges?
Yes, it would have been.
And that astounded you?
Yes.
That he had been charged?
No, the nature of the crimes he'd committed.
That he had committed them?
Yes.
That was the first occasion on which you knew that he had admitted to committing the offences?
It's my recollection, yes.
And that he had admitted to child sexual abuse on children within the parish?
Yes.
Prior to that time, had you heard that there had been allegations or rumours, but not that he had admitted to any of the conduct the subject of allegations or rumours?
I don't recall.
Is it the case that during your various discussions over the decades that you knew Ridsdale, that rumours or allegations falling short of an admission by him came to your attention?
No, I don't recall any.
You accept that during the course of the consulta meetings at which you were present as secretary
Yes.
in the 1970s, that such allegations or rumours may have risen, but you no longer remember them?
The minutes indicate that, yes.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honour.
Yes. Do you want the father excused?
Yes, Your Honour.
Yes, very well. Thank you, Father. You are excused.
Thank you very much, Your Honour.
Your Honour, there are no further witnesses for today. Tomorrow, Gerald Ridsdale will be giving evidence by audio-visual link from the prison.
At 10 o'clock?
Well, I'm assuming at 10 o'clock, but perhaps there might be some leeway given the technology involved. But
Well, we'll assume 10 o'clock then.
yes, Your Honour.
All right, and we'll adjourn until then.
Thank you.
All stands.